Welcome to the In Cobb We Trust podcast. And today we're going to talk about your favorite topic, money. I have a very special guest that I'm very excited to interview. His name is Daniel Blackman, and he is running for Public Service Commissioner. And there's been a lot of kerfuffle recently about if he's still on the ballot, not on the ballot. We're going to get into it today. But I think one thing I want everyone to know is that this guy is the real deal. And he's been fighting for progressive values for a long time and is who I would consider one of our rising, if not already, star in the Democratic Party. So stay tuned. I think it's going to be a really fun conversation. Welcome to the In Cobb We Trust podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, highly anticipated interview, candidate for Public Service Commission, Daniel Blackman. Welcome.
That's right. Welcome, man. You made me nervous coming in here with the Florida Gators flag on the way in.
Oh, now you know how I do, man. National champs.
Oh, my God. Well, I won't hold it against you, man. Thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to be in what I would consider, my second home. My mom lives here. My brother lives here. Aunt lives here. So I'm
right here in Marietta, right?
Yeah, right here in Marietta, man. I mean, my family has lived in Marietta since 2002. So,
okay.
Yeah, man. I lived briefly near Windy Hill when I first got married. That was a short stint till we moved to Atlanta. So, I mean, it's one of those things where it's, this is home. And then my father is buried in Cobb County. He's in the Georgia National Cemetery. He served in the military.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I got a lot of ties here, man.
I did not know that. Okay. So we're already, right off the bat, we're learning something. You are running for Public Service Commission.
That's right.
But this is a special election.
It is.
What? And you'll have to forgive me, but I use some colorful language. So why the are we in this position? Help me understand that. Why are we having a special election?
We're having a special election for an array of issues that lead into the complexity of the Public Service Commission, which is that whether you live in the 5 districts on the ballot, regardless if you live in District 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, every one of those elections are statewide. I am actually the last candidate to run for a Public Service Commission during my race in 2020. And the ridiculously crazy aspect of it is there was a lawsuit that called for a challenge on the disenfranchisement of Black and brown voters and voters that felt that if they were in the Metro Atlanta region in District 3 where I'm running, when Georgia conservation voters and other organizations passed a lawsuit, they felt that the Public Service Commission should be held by district only. And that's for 2 reasons, right? The first is they felt that from a diversity standpoint, representation matters, right? But then secondly, they looked at the fact that why should a predominantly Democratic district have to vote in a statewide campaign when we would almost be certain to have a public service commissioner in District 3 that was either a Democrat, a woman, person of color. I mean, you go down the gambit, the Fulton, DeKalb, and Clayton is massively diverse.
So just so I'm clear.
Okay.
5 members of the Public Service Commission.
That's correct.
And we'll get into what they do. But just for right now, 5 members of the Public Service Commission, but they're elected statewide.
They are, each and every one of them. So if you live in this district where Tricia Pridemore is, right?
Okay.
You don't have to have your district on the ballot to vote for me or to vote for the other 4 around the state.
Makes no sense to me whatsoever.
It makes no sense at all. But they did that because the Public Service Commission started as a railroad commission in the 1870s. Once it evolved over a 56-year period, they included telecommunications, electricity, and gas, right?
Okay. I'm learning something new. I think I'm learning just like these folks are. And I've heard you speak, but I think it's not easy to understand for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Like it's complicated. So you start, Public Service Commission starts to regulate railroads.
That's correct.
But now encompasses, you said, telecommunications,
gas, and electricity. That's right.
3 things.
That's right.
3 things now. Now, explain to me, the Georgia conservation voters filed a lawsuit?
They filed a lawsuit with, and I'll be here too long to name all of the, organizations mentioned in the suit.
Okay.
But essentially the suit was that each of the districts should be able to vote for their own commissioner. Because that way we would be able to understand whether it was Fulton, DeKalb, and Clayton, or it was District 2 where Alicia Johnson's running. We wanted to make sure during that time that there was equity in the way the vote was so they could be more balanced at the Public Service Commission.
They lost.
Well, no, they won. They won the lawsuit in 2022, right? But then the decision was appealed. and it was reversed back to the original state of what we have known as the Public Service Commission. And here's what one of the reasons it was broken up to, and I can be, you have to fact check me on this, but what I realized was that there was a time when the Public Service Commission was voted on by district. But then in the mid 80s, they wanted South Georgia to have representation. So I think sometime around 1987 is when we have the system that we are currently seeing at the Public Service Commission, where they made it statewide so that it would give a better opportunity for South Georgia to have representation at the commission.
Okay. Now, the timeline, you said you ran in 2020.
That's correct.
You lost that race.
I lost the runoff in 2021.
So there was a runoff.
Yes. I'm one of 3 Democrats to make it to a runoff in the last 22 years.
Okay, so you have 2021, we lose the runoff, but
That's
then
right.
in 2022, they win the lawsuit, but then it gets reversed.
It got reversed.
That's why I'm trying to figure out how do we get like an open seat?
So what happened was they were supposed to be Public Service Commission races on the ballot at that time, right? So in 2022, we were supposed to have the current races we're having now, District 2 and District 3,
okay,
were supposed to happen in 2022. The lawsuit stopped that because the judge initially said, we're going to rule in favor of this being by district.
Okay.
And so the races that were on the ballot that year had to cease and desist because at that time, the races had already started. They had already went through qualifying. It's insane.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. So halfway through, you had, and I think 1 or 2 of the candidates that is currently running in this contested primary had already even paid their qualifying fee. When it went to appeals and was reversed, they basically reversed the schedule. And then what this essentially did, and this is going to blow your mind, it basically added 2 years to each of the commissioners' terms, because these are 6-year terms. So the first thing people need to understand is these seats.
Oh, it's not a 4-year term.
No, it's a 6-year term and $118,000 a year salary. So most people don't even realize the power and the security. This position historically was where people came to end their career. Get your appointment, gracefully bow out, get a check, 6-year term, take a bunch of money from utility companies, and go on vacation.
So that is wild. Okay, so you have an election starting. Judge nixes it. They extend the terms of all these people for 2 years.
That's correct.
Now we have a primary.
That's correct.
Okay.
And to be clear, 3 of the 5 commissioners have been appointed and not elected. 3 of the 5, including.
So why? Wait, what?
3 of the 5, man.
How does that work?
How deep do you want to go, man?
People, like I've been talking to people, they don't even know what's going on.
It's insane, right? Man.
Everybody's like, what is going on?
And I know we'll get into it later, but what I want to say is, it's bittersweet for the challenges we are going through now, because it's actually inadvertently heightening awareness of the Public Service Commission, because people are starting to now say, well, what does this position even do, right? So, people are starting to really pay attention. We have worked on the education side of the Public Service Commission for a long time, but because of how the legislative body has set up the commission to work, it's been very complicated, and I think that's by intention.
Okay, so the governor appoints?
Yes.
And he's put 3 people on the commission.
He has. And the reason why he can do that is because, for example, Chuck Eden and I were neighbors when he was a District 3 Public Service Commissioner. Okay. Chuck Eden became a judge under Governor Kemp, and his seat was vacated. So Kemp appointed, who is now sitting there, a guy named Fitz Johnson. And Fitz is in that seat. Fitz has no energy background whatsoever, but was a big donor to Kemp's campaign. So got appointed to the seat. So what we can literally
So you elect someone.
You can elect someone.
They elected someone. That person gets a judge seat, and then the governor gets
midway between their terms, so they didn't have to run again. And then the governor got to appoint that person to finish out the term. The challenge was it was 3 years, to my knowledge, on Fitz's term. But when the court decision was overturned, that added 2 years to his term. So if Fitz were to be, God forbid, reelected, he could potentially be serving 8 years. And 4 of which would have been as appointed, right? Bubba McDonald, who I ran against in the past, he has a son named Lauren McDonald Jr. Bubba is in his mid-80s. It is very likely that Bubba will step down before Kemp leaves, and the namesake of his son alone could put him right in that seat. These are the types of things that
holy this is some serious cronyism.
It's interesting, man. I mean, I'm not going to use your I'm not going to use your.
That's okay. I'll do it.
Language, but I mean, it is.
Yeah,
I'm
that's all right.
agreeing.
You're an elected. You can't.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Wow. That I just learned a lot more.
And we haven't even talked about what the hell they do.
No. Yeah, that's exactly. Okay. Telecommunications, gas, electricity.
Mm-hmm.
For the layperson, myself included, in terms of paying for utilities, we have seen a steady increase in utility rates.
That's right.
Why?
You have to ask the people that are getting checks from the people they regulate. I mean, we're seeing a steady increase for. So, like, let me not use as much sarcasm and just speak directly to a picture that I think people would understand, right?
Okay.
Because the argument is that we want a safe and reliable grid. For those that don't know, the grid is what allows this light to come on for our phones to charge. If we get a hurricane or a storm tomorrow, we want to be able to turn our lights on. If our power goes out, we want it to come back on, right? We can all agree with that.
Absolutely.
2021, Texas gets hit with a massive snowstorm.
I remember that.
Their grid completely is destroyed. They can't get back online. People lose their lives. Folks are struggling for weeks while Ted Cruz is on a beach somewhere. We don't want that to happen in Georgia. Okay. Georgia Power, to be fair, has done a good job of ensuring that our grid has been reliable. The practices it has taken to get there has been for the Public Service Commission to determine what the energy mix is that will allow our grid to be resilient, right? I use that word.
Okay.
And what that means is the mix of energy for the amount of people in Georgia. I think there's 11.6 or 11.8 million people that call Georgia home. 2.7 million are Georgia Power customers. If you're not a Georgia Power customer, you got an EMC, a MEAG,
right?
Some type
like Marietta has
CAB-EMC,
yeah,
right. Mm-hmm. So the way this kind of works, and it's not as attractive, is we are supposed to allow Georgia Power to make a profit. I think they're guaranteed to make an 11.9% profit. Nationally, utility companies are supposed to make somewhere between 8 and 12%. So Georgia Power is right at the top point. They can make about 11.9 to 14% of a return on their investment. It's a sweet deal, right?
That's a great return on your investment.
And here's the craziest part. So I'll use Plant Vogtle as an example. So you remember that?
I was going to ask you about that.
Remember the example I gave you about Texas, right?
Yeah.
So when we built Plant Vogtle, we were told, right, by Georgia Power that this project would give Georgia the load that it needs to make sure the grid can stay secure, right? Because we were generating a massive amount of energy. Vogtle 1 and 2 that was built in the 70s and 80s was getting old. It was infrastructure problems. So we need these two new.
So they're nuclear reactors, just for the
two
people.
Nuclear reactors. Okay. So exactly. So Plant Vogtle 1 and 2 were our nuclear reactors from the 70s. Well, really from the 80s until the mid 2000s, right?
Okay.
Vogtle 3 and 4, the expansion came online, and it was supposed to be done in a certain amount of time for a certain amount of money, right?
Okay.
The very, very simple way to explain Vogtle is it was 7.5 years behind schedule, and it was 15 billion over budget. 15 billion over budget. So Georgia Power initially said this would be about an $8 to $14 million project. It ended up being a $34 billion. They said it was going to be 8 to 15 billion. It ended up being 36 billion. Georgia Power was only on the hook for 2 billion.
No, why? No, stop you right there. What? That don't make no flipping sense to me.
Your 5 public service commissioners are the ones that vote on how those are going to be, the project is going to be financed and how the rate of return happens. So the Public Service Commission unanimously voted to allow Georgia Power to recoup their costs, which means and I'm not a mathematician, but if you look at it as of today, we've got about 62 more years as ratepayers that we'll be paying for.
So we're on the hook for 10 billion.
And most people, what they don't do is get an itemized bill, right? The itemized bill up until recently would have shown you have something called nuclear cost recovery. That NCR was basically a tax levied on a person's bill. So most people think when I walk into a room, I turn on my light, I charge my phone, that's my bill. That's not your bill. You have fuel costs in your bill. You have storm recovery costs in your bill. You have nuclear construction costs in your bill. But most people don't realize that when you look down the line, I'm paying for all this extra stuff. Now, I'm not saying that it's not critical for us to have skin in the game. But when Georgia Power shareholders...
If you're making 12% profit guarantee, give me a break.
And 6 of the last 7 rate increases, 6 of the last 7 rate hearings have gone to be increases. So it is and I don't want to get ahead of the conversation, but it's no surprise that at the time when the most eyes are on the Public Service Commission, the governor, who has never come out for anything Public Service Commission, calls a press conference with the Public Service Commission to talk about a deal to freeze utility rates for 3 years. What happens in 3 years? Year 1, Here's a public service commission race. Year 2, midterms, public service commission race. Year 3, public service commission race. What can you do in a 3-year period? You can get the majority if if we elect 2 Democrats this year that become commissioners and we're reelected next year, you only need 1 more for everything that I just said to go in a much different direction.
Okay, let me expound on that a little bit. Are you saying that it would be possible to make Georgia Power pay more of a share of that $12 billion rather than show Q taxpayer?
No, I'm not saying that because that deal has already been made. That deal has already been made. But now we have data centers coming, right? And I'm sure we'll discuss it.
Yes.
But data centers, I mean, I was pleasantly surprised that Republicans this year in the House and the Senate, were proposing a bill to make data centers have to pay more than putting us in a position. Because look, when you talk about Vogel, the reason why I did so good with Republicans statewide was because I talked about coal ash in Juliet, Georgia, where in that area, you have a lot of Republicans. We talked about the Savannah River site and the ecosystem contamination, water extraction. We were able to have conversations about that. So when you look at data centers, for example, in Fayette County, right, you have white landowners that are thinking that they're getting a development right next to them, but it's really, a 1 million square foot data center that is coming into their community, not offering jobs. There's a lot of challenges around water extraction and contamination,
right?
Environmental hazards, a lack of regulatory process, and the county commissions that are separate from the Public Service Commission are making these deals. And again, to sweeten the pot, Kemp passed or at least moved to allow $250 million plus of upfront incentives for data centers. We are ground zero in Georgia for data centers. So all of this stuff is complexity,
and they're really energy intensive.
They are massive. Look, for those of your viewers that don't know, I fell short of the Public Service Commission race. I ended up working to run the Environmental Protection Agency in the Southeast, and a part of my role was to regulate the impact of cryptocurrency and data mining in Kentucky. Right, that was one of my 8 states.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
So this goes into my background, and when people don't realize the environmental impact of this, I mean, and here's how far it goes. I was up at 11 o'clock at night, and I do work with Billie Eilish and her mom. Billie's mom has a foundation called Support and Feed, and she said, "Dude, what the hell?" And she sends me this link, and it's people in California and people in Michigan and people in Texas that are watching Georgia because of the data centers, right? So what I don't think people realize is this Public Service Commission is so critical to energy burden, energy usage, investment, structure, and the future of renewable energies, which includes rooftop solar, community solar, right-of-way solar, battery storage. This is a position that, as much as people don't know, impacts every aspect of your life.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize, to be honest, before this conversation, I didn't realize all of that.
Yeah.
Because it's just a lot. I think a couple questions. So essentially what you're saying, I think what I'm hearing is that the Public Service Commission has a huge impact on the environment and climate.
110%. And the biggest impact of any single state agency, even more, in my opinion, than the Environmental Protection Division that is under the purview of the governor's office.
And so how do you, because I've been obsessed with the environment since I don't know when, maybe like when I watched Fern Gully, like way back when. And in my, I would say somewhat ignorant, but somewhat informed view, solar, renewable energy, not using fossil fuels really is a transition that we need to make. Is that fair?
And it is a transition that the industry has actually committed to. So companies like Shell Oil and Exxon and different fossil fuel industries have committed. The problem is, when you go back to Obama's goal was between 2030 and 2035, right? Which is literally within a decade.
To be energy independent.
Yes, right. We wanted that transition
or renewable total.
Yeah. To transition to renewables, right? Uh-huh. Now, looking back on it, and I appreciate Obama, and he opened a lot of doors for me when I was just getting involved politically. But with the Clean Power Plan, that was aggressive because the gap was a 20-year gap. So the fossil fuel industry wanted to have the transition by 2050. So Obama even went up to, I think, 2035. With Biden, he came in and said, well, we want to be, at that point for this energy transition by 2040. right? So the end date of how we get there is, it's in question. But the reality of it is the Public Service Commission really has probably the most influence on how energy projects that come into our state have a long-term impact, and whether we are going to overinvest into fossil fuel and underinvest into solar, or vice versa. So when they make those decisions, if Georgia Power says, hey, we want 78% of fossil fuels in our mix, then guess what? That commission will vote on how that project will happen. And the difference, if you have an EMC, is on the financing of the projects that the EMCs present to the Public Service Commission.
How do you propose, or in an ideal world, that Georgia gets to 100% renewable energy? Over what time frame? How do we do it? What does it look like? Because I think like those are big terms.
Yeah.
But there's solar, there's geothermal, there's wind, right? Those are some of the renewable energy.
I personally believe Georgia can get there by 2040. I think realistically, Georgia will be there right around 2045, because the industry is now leaning towards understanding the importance of investing into renewables. The private sector is now involved. There was a time where transitioning to solar was more taboo, right? It was more of a hippie thing. I got solar panels on my house.
I got solar panels on one of my houses here. Yeah.
I remember when people saw Teslas, not Teslas, the Prius, the Toyota Prius. I remember when people saw Priuses, they were just thinking like, oh, you got to be DiCaprio or a tree hugger to drive a Prius, right? but you have to understand, during Obama's era, we missed the damn mark. We had an opportunity because Obama, if you remember, passed a tax credit right up to $4,000.
Yeah.
That if you weatherize your home, you can write that off. You add solar, you can write it off. Well, as soon as Trump got in office, he reversed that. And look, we lost a great Georgian this year in Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter had solar panels on the White House, right? And people don't even realize that Jimmy did that in the 70s, right? And so I think that what Obama did, because of how he aggressively pursued renewables, pissed off the energy industry. And they said, we will not be mandated to meet your terms. And the challenge we have is that we are living in a time where the generation now that I think, people can be mad at them or not, but what is it, Gen Z, that basically said, because of Gaza, because of a lack of climate interest and investment, we're not going to vote, because these kids are single issue voters, right? I mean, that's my son's generation. I mean, they believe in something so hard that it's non-negotiable, right? And I think where we missed it was, even from the Obama administration to the Biden-Harris administration, we saw this tremendous accelerated kind of commitment that put a tremendous amount of incentives in place. And I'll give you an example. I ran the most conservative region in the United States, the Southeastern United States. 6 of the 8 governors in my region were Republican, right? I mean, Andy Beshear in Kentucky is a Democrat, and what's my guy's name in North Carolina? Roy Cooper, right? Roy and Andy were the only 2 Democrats I had. I had DeSantis, dude. I mean, like, I had
Ronnie
man. So I want you to understand, for your viewers, the bipartisan infrastructure law was historic. I mean, this was the New Deal of our generation. $1.2 trillion investment into energy, into infrastructure, roads and bridges. That included the largest single investment, $27 billion, through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which I helped to implement, to focus on returning those investments. So now states like Georgia with Q cells, right? There's money on the table, right? Hyundai and Kia for electric vehicles, Rivian, money on the table, right? And so what we saw was an accelerated investment that was backed by the federal government. Guess who used that, right? Doge's commander-in-chief, right? Or at least formerly. Tesla would not exist if it did not have the initial $500 million investment from the Department of Energy. And so they used federal subsidies to accelerate this just transition. What does that mean for the Public Service Commission? Almost everything, because now the utility companies that had the backing of the federal government were able to leverage that backing and use that federal money up front to accelerate and build these projects. Plant Vogtle, the company Westinghouse, went bankrupt. We should never have been stuck and fitted with that bill once we saw the project in South Carolina fail. We stuck with it. And we can argue what we could have done better or what other form of energy was there. What we can't argue was that ratepayers got stuck with the bill. My children, and their children will be paying this off for 60 plus years. And that is directly attributed to the Public Service Commission. And we have to find ways to educate people because those bills and those decisions absolutely matter.
And okay, here's one question I had, because you mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, or the infrastructure bill, rather.
Yeah, bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction.
And I have a couple of different points of view when it comes to like building something and then having regulation.
Yeah.
Right. Because I've built stuff and regulation has been in my way. Right. And I like building houses and just on a very local level, setbacks, variances, all this stuff. One of the issues I have heard, let's say with building high-speed internet access.
So access to
broadband has been regulations and getting projects off the ground. What does the Public Service Commission have to do with any of that, if any?
On the broadband issue? Or just projects?
Or, getting approval for projects or red tape, regulation?
Yeah, so the Public Service Commission, think of it as an administrative clearinghouse, right? So the projects are presented, and how we get from point A to point Z is presented by the utility companies or by the telecommunications companies, take AT&T or whatever. They present that to the Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission has a staff, and that staff is responsible to basically look at the docket, look at what's presented, make administrative recommendations on each of them. So you can have telecommunications expansion in a broadband desert, and you can have, I don't know, man, a data center coming up that Microsoft is backing. Those decisions go to the Public Service Commission directly, right? And they make decisions overall. So the financing of these projects are absolutely within that purview. I think I answered the question.
So, but I guess I was like, where you build and how you build and the environmental review, that's a separate entity that has to approve those?
It depends, right? So the model, let me start federal, state, and not bore your tremendous people that are watching this show, right? So the federal government can deploy capital, right? Say, for example, we give, and I'll use this example. We deployed over $500 million in Georgia while I was in 1 year of me serving as a regional administrator, right? The state gets that money. So they get money through what's an SRF, state revolving fund, right? So they can kind of dictate how that money is spent, and where that money goes.
Okay.
That's why the governor can say, well, this is the best place to do business, right? He might not say Biden gave me the money, but he's going to say, hey, man, we're doing a good job over here, right? And pat himself on the back. What happens is these private companies like Georgia Power will say, well, we have this project that we want to commit to. We're not going to self-finance the project, right? And most banks, you got to remember, when nuclear plant Vogtle was expanded, there hadn't been a nuclear project in the United States in 32 years. So banks were like, we're not financing that, right? So they had to find a way to get that paid off. And what happened was ratepayers were paying for Plant Vogtle while it was being built and after it was being built. So I want you to think about this. You go and say, I'm going to build this brand new house. And the minute they pour concrete, you start paying a mortgage. Well, that's what Georgians had to do. That's what ratepayers had to do. The minute they broke ground for Plant Vogtle, we started paying for it. And once that amount hit $2 billion, Georgia Power was out of the game because they were committed to their portion of the project. The remaining balance was a decision by the Public Service Commission to ensure that ratepayers would have the full, responsibility to pay off that project. So these projects are presented, and the Public Service Commission has to approve their financing, their project schedules, and everything across the board.
But the environmental review is not you guys.
No, it is not.
Okay. That's what I wanted to make sure is like.
Well, you should have just told me to shut up.
No. I like to let people talk. Okay. So I guess one question, what do you think people should know that we haven't discussed yet about the Public Service Commission and why it's important to them?
I think a couple of things, man. I mean, look, the South sucks when we think about how much has happened here and how much people have been left behind, right? When you look at rural Georgia, when you look at rural Alabama, rural Mississippi, I mean, I walk these communities and counties as a private citizen, as a presidential appointee, as a candidate, and these communities are struggling, man. I mean, you got places like Dougherty County in Albany that hasn't recovered since COVID. At one point, Albany, Georgia had the fourth highest concentration of COVID outbreaks in the world at one point. They still haven't recovered, right? Yet and still, you have people in Albany, Georgia, whose light bills are as high as their rent. I mean, that's insane, right? People are
Wait, are you
paying,
serious?
I'm very serious. Look, on average in the nation, to your viewers and to you as an individual, nationally, Georgia has one of the highest energy burdens in the country, right? And to put this in context, I use this example a lot on the campaign trail. In West Virginia, they pay around $690 per month for their utility bills. $690.
That's insane.
Well, in Georgia, we pay around $570 per month for our utilities, right? 10% of most people's bills go to their electric bill alone. So when you look at these numbers of what we cumulatively are impacted on, I think people need to know about the Public Service Commission, how much they directly impact our communities and the people we love. Because if you're a senior citizen on fixed income, those rate increases that you talked about earlier, guess what? That fixed income don't go up. If you're on a fixed income month to month and you're 65 years or older and your light bill goes up and then a data center says, hey, we're going to build this massive place and your bill's going to probably go up $55. For most people, they're thinking, well, it's just this amount of money. Dude, that's like an extra 2-3 grand a year. And for a working family, for a single mom, for someone trying to get their kid to college, for somebody trying to decide between their medication, their prescription, or their light bill, that's a lot of money you're taking out of people's pockets. So I want people to understand that one of the reasons why and this is probably the most critical thing I'll say about the Democratic Party, is that we do a horrible job of talking about the education and importance of down ballot elections. We should have been winning this seat for the past 20 years, because economically it does not make sense that we are robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Well, it's corporate welfare, right?
It is. And they can say all they want about strengthening the grid and affordability and where that mix comes in, but transparency matters. And when the two candidates right now, let me put this into perspective for this year's race. The two candidates on the Republican side, both of which were appointed, right? These individuals have collectively taken almost $600,000 to date for their races from the utility companies.
Oh, I'm sure that's for just because it's fun, just because it's nice, right? They don't. The power companies don't expect anything in return.
It's insane.
Why would anyone suggest that?
And I think that's what people need to know, like how much money is taken, the communities impacted, but more than anything else, the reach of the Public Service Commission. Because people think just, when I talk to people about bills, they just think just like water and electric. They don't think about all the impacts that these decisions make on their day-to-day lives. And I think it's really important for us to understand fundamentally the importance of why this race matters.
They're taking money out of your pocket.
Yep.
They're just reaching in through your utility bill and giving it to the energy company.
That's right.
With a sweet deal, in the form of a sweet deal.
The day Kemp did his press conference that was at the Capitol, while the news and everybody was at the Capitol, Georgia Power was having a shareholder meeting down the street talking about record profits. I mean, these are things that we have to understand. And I want to go on the record. I have no problem with Georgia Power making money. I have no problem with that. But when ratepayers are struggling to buy a home, afford their rent, or pay their bill, and we're saying that we need more, give me more, how much more do you have to be able to give when you're just trying to pay your bills, man, or get on MARTA or get on, Cobb County Transit? Like, we have to start humanizing these races, and this probably has the most direct impact on the pocketbook.
Wow. I think I'm learning a lot just this interview. Okay. Let's talk about the shenanigans.
Let's go, man. Which part of the roller coaster do you want to start on?
Well, I've already cast my vote for you, but I don't know if I'm going to be disenfranchised or not.
Yeah.
And can you help? I know there are things that you cannot talk about because you're in active litigation.
Yes.
But what you can say, what is going on?
Well, we found out early in, really at the middle of May, that my residency had been challenged. Let me start with
like a month, like 3 weeks ago.
But let me paint the picture so that I can really put this into perspective as to why I'm pissed off.
Okay.
We found out that we were challenged on April the 17th. Okay. We could have easily gone to court within 2 weeks. My name wasn't even on the ballot. Ballots weren't even printed until right around the 10th or 12th of May. We could have resolved this issue prior to there being any even inkling of voter disenfranchisement, because again, we found out that the challenge had been made on the 17th of April. We didn't find this out until the middle of May. Okay. The problem that we had across the board was by the time we found out, we were trying to figure out what this meant to the early voting period that was starting in 2 weeks. We get a hearing request for, I believe, May the 22nd. And now we're scrambling because, to put this into perspective, I've lived in Atlanta for over 20 years. I happened to move north of Atlanta and I made a home north of Atlanta only to decide that we want to move closer to family. Our kids are going to college in Atlanta now. And we made a decision to start changing our lifestyle and, kind of like returning to where everything started, which is what we were in the process of doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that within this time frame. So the challenge that came up not only caught us off guard, but for certain aspects of the case I can't discuss,
Mm-hmm.
what we realized was that we needed to make sure that from a litigation process, we were prepared. We had information, we had affidavits, we had witnesses, we presented all of it through our administrative hearing. And unfortunately, not only were we taken off guard by the date and the quickness of this, but we were also taken off guard because, again, April 17th, it shouldn't take 6 weeks for you to have a hearing to determine if someone's qualified. When we signed paperwork on April the 3rd, took us almost 6 full weeks for us to have an administrative hearing a week before the election to be disqualified the day of early voting, right? And so while I respect the process, I respect
You have to say that. I don't.
but I do, and because look, man, I'm just going to be honest with you, man. I come from a military family. I mentioned earlier my dad's buried in North Georgia Georgia National Cemetery, and I respect the rule of law. I don't agree with this process. I don't agree with what has been going on, but we are very disappointed that the confusion and the distraction that I believe in many aspects is intentional. I can't point at the other side, right? This came internally. This came from one of the candidates in the race that is familiar with somebody that put up a challenge, and neither the candidate nor the individual had the audacity to show up in court. No one showed up. They threw a rock into a glass window. We had our day in court. We were very much prepared to face any accusation. And unfortunately, it has gotten to a point where voters have to now scramble that we have worked our asses off for the last 3 years to gain the trust. And I'm not a fly-by-night candidate. When I ran for the Public Service Commission in 2020 and 2021, I built infrastructure from 2005. My entry point was Hurricane Katrina. 20 years in August will be the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. I started my career in Valdosta, in coastal Georgia, in rural Georgia. When I moved to North Georgia after living in Atlanta for 18 years, we moved because we wanted to help to expand this idea of progressiveness, because I don't know if you noticed, I was Bernie Sanders' political director. So I ran Bernie.
No wonder we get along.
Oh my gosh, man. So I was Bernie's political director, and I remember having one of my most important conversation with Congressman Lewis. And I haven't really told this story, but Congressman Lewis said to me one time, he said, what do you want to do? Right. And to have a question like that come from someone as iconic as Congressman Lewis, you don't want to F that up. Right. You're just like, I don't want to say like, I want to be a dog catcher. You got to come up with something good. Right. And I said, I want to serve. And he said to me, because at the time we were thinking about, Roswell and, Forsyth and different areas. And he said to me, you've got to be willing to go where we haven't been. He said, Martin and I wouldn't go to Forsyth County when we were marching. He said that was an area we wouldn't go. And he said that you can't be where it's comfortable. Went to Congressman Hank Johnson. Hank will remember this story. And he said, Daniel, sometimes you got to think like a buzzard. And I said, dude, that sounds like an insult. What does that mean? He said, sometimes you got to fly around until you find your prey. And then you got to come down and get it. And we decided to move a little bit north because Atlanta was safe for me, right? It was safe to be in a place that I had grown up. I had gone to college, my wife went to college. I've worked in Atlanta for 26 years now. So we never left Atlanta. We came home. And so for us to have gone through this process, understand the toll on my family, understand the fact that I have had to, in the middle of fundraising, in the middle of campaigning, in the middle of I've put 6,000 miles in my car since March. On my wife's car. Let me clear that up, because she's going to probably watch this and say, yeah, dude, you get me a new car. But I mean, I want people to understand, all jokes aside, that I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I feel like we are being made an example of. And even when we have our day in court, the appeal process will happen on April 10th. And
June 10th.
On June 10th. So
Okay.
thank you, sir. But no, so on June 10th, we will have an answer. And what I want your viewers to know is that, you don't spend 2 decades building the capacity to run, to serve, to work, to make a reckless decision to just allow that to go away. Could things have been done better? I mean, I think we all, as children, as adults, I mean, at any point of our life, would do things differently. But I think that I can say that I feel that the amount of time that has gone by when this could have been resolved, even in a worst case scenario that this didn't go in my favor, at least the ballots would have been printed in a way that reflects the ability for a person to make a vote. And for us to be at the middle of this, we are literally, the Achilles heel of the voting process right now. And I get hundreds of people that email me and call me almost every other day. They're like, hey, we're on standby. And I can't tell you how much I thank those of you that are watching and people that are saying, man, I voted for you. I mean, I went to Reverend Warnock's church and I spent some time with Reverend Senator Warnock. And there was a line of people, and I'll say about a little less than a third of them for me, and the rest were for him. And it was people that were shaking my hand and people that were saying, we're watching, we're waiting, we're praying. And so for us, we want the process to play out, but I want to give my sincere gratitude and heartfelt concern to anyone that is given a vote, because we feel that this is a time where we should be kicking ass and taking names. And unfortunately, as Democrats, when you get knocked down, you get right back up. And I will tell people that regardless of the outcome, I'm not going anywhere. I mean, this is something that I believe in. Educating voters is critical to me. And this race, people can mock or ridicule me for running. This is my third time running for the seat. And you say what you want, but I'm not here jumping from election to election. I'm here fighting to educate people. I've been doing this for over 8 years. And you sat here and just said to me 20 minutes ago that you still don't really understand it, which means there's more work to be done as a candidate or as an advocate. And that's what I'm committed to.
Wow. It's clear, right, that you've spent so much time trying to serve, trying to make it better, trying to end this corporate welfare. It feels like they're just attacked by the billionaires and the rich people against everybody else. And this lawsuit and the residency, I joked actually with a couple of my friends, because I was like, oh, I guess I'm disenfranchised. Oh, I guess I'm a colored person in America, right? Like it just feels that way. And I think, I'm also on part of this grassroots style to support your campaign.
Yeah.
And we're all waiting with bated breath for June 10th.
Yeah. Because,
hey, if you win that appeal and everything goes forward, we're rocking and rolling.
That's right.
And I think the uncomfortable aspect is to have to discuss what if it doesn't happen the way we want it to.
I mean, is that a question or are you just giving a comment?
You could take it either way.
I'm going to take it both ways, man. The comment part is I respect every ounce of what you just said, right? Because I lose sleep at night thinking about how many people have helped me to get to where I am, right? I mean, people like June Chris in North Georgia, and a woman named Wilma Turner and her husband George, and people that are in Valdosta, in Augusta. I grew up in Columbus, Georgia. People that watched me live in Atlanta, build a family, and it hurts, because as a candidate, I'm supposed to sit back and just take all of these darts being thrown and be cordial, right, and not clap back on stage, right? So I mean, you have to understand, for me, the poise it takes to be there.
That's a lot of energy.
It is a lot of energy, and understand that I still got to be a husband. I still have to be a father, right? I got 2 kids going to college that I got to pay for, right? So, all of this while fighting, not for me to be on the ballot, fighting to keep the integrity of my name, right? So I want people to understand this is bigger than me just, trying to do that. Now, here's the thing, right? I mean, the best case scenario is that this appeal goes in our favor. And we work hard to do what we tried from the beginning. We felt we were on a trajectory to win the primary without a runoff. That's what
we were working toward, right?
And we feel that At this point, we just don't know. I think that we have performed well given the circumstances, but we were voters around the state were told not to vote for me for 3 full days. We had to file an emergency injunction to get the Fulton County Superior Court, who we're grateful for, right? Regardless of how this turns out, I'm thankful that the process has afforded us the ability to fight, right? Because it could have easily gone a different way. And from day one, we've had to fight back. The best case scenario is that we continue to compete. We get a shot at winning this runoff. The primary without a runoff, or we have a runoff and become the Democratic nominee. The worst case scenario is sometime on or after June 10th, we find out that, hey, this is not looking great for us. And what I do is I look at folks in the camera and I go to people in person and I say, all right, now I'm going to roll my sleeves up as a private citizen, and we're going to make sure that we work very hard to get at least one seat on the Public Service Commission. And that's what I'm going to do. But what I will not do is allow any scenario to impede my ability to serve and to lead, because that's how I was raised. My dad was a United States Army Ranger, man, and he wasn't scared of anything, right? And so for me, being raised in a house, my grandfather was a diplomat, right? My father was special forces. My father-in-law served at the Pentagon. Like,
I
I don't run away from no fight. So for me, you're gonna either have to fight me as a candidate, or you're gonna have to fight me as a private citizen. And the worst part about it is, this time last month, no one was talking about the Public Service Commission, right? So in an awkward way, they have, in their attempt to get me removed, have heightened the understanding and the awareness of what the Public Service Commission is and why we should vote.
And you can kind of keep your cards close to the vest, or not have to answer the question. I won't be offended, but in the worst case scenario, do we look toward you to make some sort of endorsement?
I'm not ready to answer that.
That's
because but I can talk about it, but I'm not ready to answer it because
not who, but like,
yeah, no, but I'll tell you why, man. I truly believe that of the four of us that are candidates, three are qualified. I believe that. I believe three of the four have the qualifications and the fortitude to understand this position and run. My concern isn't as much with the ability to serve. It's the ability to have worked their butts off and win. I didn't go to Augusta or Macon or Houston or Pooler, right? Or Towns County, Union County, Raven County, Muskogee County. I can talk for days about where I've been. I didn't start going to these places because I was a candidate. And my concern is, you have people that run for office in Georgia and they think that a statewide election means winning Atlanta. And it doesn't. If you can't go to Cobb County and you can't go into Rome and Athens, and those people don't know you or trust you, let me tell you something, man. I had, and this is going to feed into why I'm saying this answer. When I ran for the Public Service Commission the first time, I went to Juliet, Georgia. Aaron Brockovich had just left a couple of weeks previously.
Oh, wow.
Y'all gotta know. And I go in, I'm knocking on doors, man, and I see a Donald Trump sign and a Daniel Blackman sign in one person's yard. And I'm like, what the hell is this?
That is interesting.
And I'm freaked out, dude. And I knock on the door, and it's a woman. And she said, Mr. Blackman, I'm a 40-year. First of all, she said a candidate had never come to her home before. She said, I'm a 40-year card carrying Republican. But she said, the creek I grew up playing in has coal ash. I can't take my grandkids in there. My neighbor died of lung cancer. My husband has cancer. 5 of our friends that we've known for over 30 years all have cancer. And I'm not even 60 yet. And she said, half of our friends have died. She said, I hate Georgia Power, right? She said, I hate what they have done to the community that I love. Now, that's her experience, right? That's not my campaign pitch against them. It's just, that was her truth to me. And when she said that to me, she looked me in the eye and she said, I've listened to what you said, and I don't know that there's anyone else I can trust. I don't know if you're going to do the job, but I can't afford to not vote, even if it's against my interests. This is what a woman said to me, right? I can go to almost any county in this state, and there will be friends or individuals that may not say I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, but they'll say Daniel shows up. When Ahmaud Arbery was killed and Daniel was running for the Public Service Commission and we had to speak in Brunswick, he showed up. When Kendrick Johnson was killed in Valdosta and I was doing policy work with the Obama administration, I showed up, right? When Albany, Georgia was struggling with COVID and people were dying, I went down to Albany 3 times. And when I think of what it means to be a Democrat, the idea that we have run for positions, and I learned this from Bernie, right? Because I'll tell you why I worked with Bernie. Right? I don't mean to be all over the place.
No, man. Hey, I'm Bernie Kratz in
But I'm
2016.
going to tell you what got me with Bernie. Bernie and Hillary were at Netroots Nation, right? We were all at the same event, and Sandra Bland had just gotten killed. They shouted Hillary off stage, and she left. They shouted Bernie off stage, and he sat his butt down in the first row, and he let them yell at him. And when they tried to calm the people down, Bernie told the organizer, he said, "Let her speak, and I'm gonna listen." I didn't care at that point what people said about Bernie. I sat there and I watched this man get yelled at and get cursed at. I mean, this is before everything was Black Lives Matter. This was just say her name, right? And I remember LaDon Blackett Jones. She said, "Daniel, I'm going to be leading Bernie's efforts in the South." She said, "I got a call. Your name came up. And I'm not hiring anybody else for this position. If you tell me no, I'm calling you tomorrow. You tell me no tomorrow, I'm going to call you back the next day. And you're going to give me a yes." And so, I look at the candidates right now and I can point to your resume, but I can't point to your works. I got to be able to know that when you get elected, you're going to be more than just a guy with ideas. Because here's the thing, when you get elected to the Public Service Commission, if I get elected tomorrow, your bill doesn't go down. Your bill to pay Plant Vogel doesn't get rescinded. So what the hell are you going to do when you get there, right? I need to know what people are going to do. Putting my name or my endorsement on something, whether you're running for governor, U.S. Senate, Congress, or labor commissioner, you got to show me that you're more than having a D behind your name, because that's what got us into this position with people that have run on party line only and hasn't done a damn thing for people that have shown up and done the work. So I will not endorse any person, not for any bitter reasons or any I'm in my feelings, but if you can't show me that you're going to do the work, because what happens in a year when you make a decision I don't agree with, right? They're going to say, "Daniel told me to vote for him," right? Like, I learned that early in my career. If I put my name on it, that means we ride or die, right? Like, if I put my name on, if I say I'm going to support you, I'm going to support you. So that's a very long answer to why I will not immediately commit. And I know people will say, "Well, man, the election is in 17 days," and I'm like, that's fine. I'm great within my own space to make a decision as a grown man, because every decision that I've rushed in my life has turned out bad. Every decision I've taken my time to make has gone in my favor. So, I wish all of us, right, the opportunity to serve. And what I will commit to is encouraging and educating people and still putting miles on my wife's car to make sure people know about voting. And that's it.
And one thing I don't think you know about me is that I did family medicine residency. I went to Campbell High School here in Smyrna.
My brother went to Campbell.
Oh, that's smart
I told
guy.
you,
He's a smart guy, man. He's a smart guy.
Marietta ties.
So I went to Campbell. I went to the University of Florida. Stayed there for undergrad med school. Went to California, San Diego. Oh, baby, University of California, San Diego for family medicine residency. But I did my fellowship at the West Los Angeles VA.
Oh, wow.
In hospice and palliative medicine.
Wow.
So when you talk about veterans, when I hear about veterans, I feel a tremendous debt to them, not only for them serving freedom, our country, the Constitution, but additionally because they taught me how to take care of dying people. And it's just something very special to me to be able to take care of a veteran.
Yeah.
And when I write my note, I learned this at the VA. When you start your note, you say, "This is a 56-year-old gentleman, blah, 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 with a history of this, who came in with this, blah, blah, blah." But when it's a veteran, I put in, "This is a 56-year-old veteran with a capital V."
Yeah.
And I also learned that, and I don't know, World War II vets, they were cut from a different cloth.
They were a different breed, man.
Just a real different breed. But one thing you also said was about cancer rates.
Yeah. And
cancer rates are going up for people who are younger and younger and younger.
Yep.
And
every health marker that we have is going in the wrong direction. It's getting younger. I have two friends that died before 50. One of them got stage 4 cancer at 47. I'll be 46 this year. And so I hear you. And then what bothers me, and just please don't forget where you were at.
No.
What bothers me is that we're sacrificing the best years of our life for cheaper energy. Right? I mean, like if anyone wanted to understand the Public Service Commission in a nutshell, it's whether it's land being taken through eminent domain, or it's the commitment to fossil fuels for lower, cheaper energy, but at what cost, right?
You pay me now, pay me later.
Yeah.
And I think the larger point that I want to make is that it's not just about utility rates. It's really about your health.
That's it.
Like burning coal, burning fossil fuels, it's not good for our planet. It's not good for our health.
Yeah.
And we're dying earlier and earlier. And it actually gives me a lot of hope that we have people who get it.
Yeah.
Like for me, during this conversation, we've talked about maybe for a brief time period, but like now I feel that I got a fighter in the ring.
Yeah.
That somebody is going to stand up for the rest of us.
You know, I'll say this. I know we're short on time, man. The hardest part about facing the challenge, man, I'm really trying not to get teary-eyed, man. You know, my father passed away young. My father was 53.
Sorry.
And I went to visit my dad the day before early voting. And I spoke to him, and I wanted to, you know, I have a way of just like, before I make really tough decisions, before I got sworn in to be the regional administrator, I went and spent time with him. And I felt this tremendous burden. You know, I go to the Georgia National Cemetery every year, whether it's on the Saturday to lay the flags or on actual Memorial Day. And for the first time in a long time, I felt heavy. You know, usually I go out there and I'm peaceful, and you know, the wind is blowing right, the sun is out. I mean, it's just beautiful. And this, you know, the day Memorial Day, I went and I felt heavy. And the next day, my name was all over the newspapers, right? And I say that to just remind you, man, that what I want the viewers to know, and I want you to know as a friend and as a, you know, a global citizen, right, is that we can't be so consumed with our resume and our title and what we get elected for, than what you just said, which is, man, people are dying, man. Like people are, you know, dying because they can't afford medication. They're dying because the industry they work in. Bobby Kennedy and Dr. King were assassinated 61 days apart, right? Fighting for the same damn thing, right? Dr. King was in Memphis fighting for the Poor People Campaign with the sanitation workers. Bobby was in Appalachia fighting for the coal miners. And both of them were losing their lives, right? The sanitation workers were exposed to massively bad health environments, and the coal miners and their families through black lung disease in other areas. And Bobby rode on a train all the way back to California, went to a rally, and he lost his life. And I draw my strength from what they did, not putting myself at a Bobby or a Dr. King level, just saying the example they gave, that they died in service. And I ain't trying to go nowhere.
No, I don't want you to go anywhere either.
But, you know, the example that I took from them, man, was that if these two guys at the height of like their career could do that, and we tend to talk a lot about Dr. King, right? But the one thing we never talk about is Dr. King had a 78% disapproval rating when he was assassinated, right? 78% of Americans wanted him to go away. Just like, dude, we're tired of you. The black folks were tired of him because they felt that he was too nonviolent.
Mhm.
And the white folks were mad at him because of the Vietnam War. They were like, dude, you're anti-war, you're a communist. And I learned from them, I learned from my father that, you know, fighting and standing up for people that will never go to a public service commission meeting, might not vote for us, but they got 3 jobs, right? And they got a kid and they have a parent that they're taking care of. Like, that's why I'm on the ballot. So I appreciate the open door. I appreciate the conversation. And yeah, man, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Daniel Blackman, my hope to be the next public service commissioner
I appreciate it, man.
District
3.
3.
Statewide election. They got districts. Please remember.
You can say it, but it don't make no sense to me.
You gotta vote for Dr. Alicia Johnson in District 2, and you have to vote Daniel Blackman. Keep me lifted up. Let's stay focused. Don't get distracted. And let's do this again, man.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.